guys, Keegan Russell here. In this week's episode of the Sports Authority Gurus podcast, Tyler and I recap the KU loss to TCU and some of the questionable calls that happened down the stretch. We also debate the impact the Jalon Daniels injury will have on this offense and what we can expect now that Jason Bean is under center. Then we will preview the upcoming showdown with Oklahoma this weekend, and finally end with a little KU basketball talk as late night is just days away. So let's get right to it. All right, Tyler, welcome back in with me. Another episode here. Glad to have you on. How are we doing today?
Oh, not too bad. Wishing the game would have turned out a little different, but I'm proud of the Hawks. You know, they proved they belong, and I think we've got an exciting game this weekend to see what we see how Jason Bean plays, and a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, so the Hawks put up a pretty big fight. We're going to get into it here in a minute. But ultimately, they fell just short with TCU this weekend. Pretty back and forth game for the most part. TCU ends up winning it 38-31 down the stretch. Leaves KU sitting at 5-1, so the hopes of the undefeated season is now gone. However, the polls do still have them in the same spot. No movement there for them. So clearly, from a national perspective, they don't think that loss was a fluke and that they actually all believe TCU is a very solid opponent. So that loss being so close and covering the spread didn't impact them there. So before we kind of jump into some of the talking points I have on the game, just in general, how did you think that game shook out? What were your thoughts? Some of your big takeaways from it?
I was proud with how they played. I think the ranking goes to show that we proved that we belong and that we can play with anybody on any given day. I was proud of how they fought, the effort we showed. For our starting quarterback, Heisman candidate, to go out early like he did, and then for our backup to come in and keep us in the game and play well enough that we had chances to win. I think that speaks volumes about how what the kind of talent we have now, and how close knit of a group it is, and it's kind of that next man up mentality, and that was kind of exciting to see. Just their fight and their never thinking they're out of it.
Early on, this offense really struggled. Lots of 3-and-outs, not moving the ball down the field while TCU was on the other side. And honestly, Jalon Daniels didn't look that great up until the injury at the end of the first half there. But like you said, Jason Bean steps in for Daniels when he goes down, and the momentum started to shift. We'll get into some of the big plays that happened in the second half, but Bean really stepped up, had a massive game. We'll get into the stats here in a second too. But offensively, it was a struggle in the first half early on. KU kind of got back into it. Defense had some bright spots here and there. Like I said, ultimately fell just short. First thing I want to start with this game, though, was some of the potential questionable calls. Obviously, if you were watching at the end of the game, there were the final plays there. Most KU fans thought there should have been some pass interference calls or a defensive holding. There were actually two that I thought should have been called on that last play there, and ultimately they were not. So Tyler, just outside of that play, how do you think the officiating was in this game? Do you think it had a strong enough impact on the game to prevent KU from winning, or some other people are saying that KU just had too many mistakes, and even though they were right in it till the very end, the mistakes ultimately cost them?
Officiating, it definitely impacts the game, especially, when you have some questionable calls like that late in the game. There was also kind of a horse collar call there when we had an outside run, and they didn't call anything there. And I think that hurt our momentum a little bit. But I do think you can't blame the whole loss on officiating. Like, there was plays that we could have made, and unfortunately we just didn't get it done. But I'm hoping that even in the like we saw in the Chiefs game, we just need consistency out of the officials. It seems like they'll call something one time and you'll get the same scenario and then they won't call it. So if we can just get consistency, I think everybody will learn to live with whatever call is made, or if there's a no call. I just hope there's more consistency.
I think you hit it right there on the head. Inconsistent officiating in college football and the NFL, like we saw this past weekend, has definitely been a major issue that's leaving, especially once you bring in all the sports gambling now across the country, that some of these calls really have big impacts on games and can impact the pocketbooks of a lot of the sports gamblers. Outside of that call, I agree with you there too about that horse collar. I was so shocked that one didn't get called either. I'm sure if it happened on the other sideline on KU side, it would have been called. Even though he didn't technically tackle him by the horse collar, he started with his fingers in there, pulling him back until he finished the tackle. So that one is kind of questionable. But that last play on fourth down, you had Quentin Skinner running. He was running straight down the field. Arnold was getting ready to cut in on a post. And one clip I saw, it looked like to me there were two penalties there. One, Skinner, as he was running, he got grabbed on the hips. And I swear the way he grabbed him, that forced him to turn his body a little bit and change his direction, which should be pass interference or defensive holding there. And then immediately right after that, as we see Arnold make his cut, he's got the guy all over him, holding him by his waist too. So two blown calls there that ultimately cost KU an opportunity to go down the rest of the field and score. Had those calls been placed, we're not really sure how the game would have ended up. KU may still have lost at some point there, but it sucks when you don't get that opportunity because a ref gets in the way. And I don't think that was the only call that the refs were a big impact on. Some of the biggest plays of the game for both teams were very questionable officiating calls. Obviously the Quentin Skinner, well, actually both touchdowns were questionable. The first one he kind of bobbled it, but they decided because they called it a touchdown first, there wasn't enough evidence to return it. And of course, that beautiful one towards the later half of the game where he caught it and just barely got his knee and shin in. Again, the refs called that a touchdown from the get go. So another hard one to overturn. That had they called it a non-touchdown to begin with, it probably wouldn't have standed. And then a couple plays throughout the game. So let's talk about those big plays that did break KU's way. Quentin Skinner, as we've talked before, has had an impressive start to this year. Walk on, turn scholarship, tall, lanky, um, can get down the field, can get open, jump for some big throws down the field. What was your takeaway as far as the play calling for those big plays and just the tremendous ability to bring the ball? I mean, Luke Grimm had another catch too at the back of the end zone. Just the touchdowns we saw on Saturday on KU side were just huge plays that fortunately the refs uh kept the call the way it was that broke KU's way. But take me through your thoughts on some of those big plays we saw.
It's funny when we started out before the season, wide receiver was kind of a question mark that we talked about. And now here we are, what, 5, 6 games into the season, and they're looking like they're one of the bright spots of the team. I mean, Skinner looks amazing. Grimm, it seems like he's always making catches on third downs, and Arnold, he gets his fair share. And then I was reading earlier today that Trevor Wilson is even back with the team. And he won't play this weekend, but I think there's a chance he plays later in the season. And I think even he'll be another guy that can stretch the field. And it's cool seeing that wide receiver group have the success that they're having because they're kind of unheralded guys. Skinner was a walk on, Grimm wasn't too highly recruited, sort of a local guy. And then Lawrence Arnold, he was in the portal for a while that convinced him to come back, and he's having a good year. So it's fun to see those guys scoring and catching a lot of passes. And when Bean has everything going right and he stays consistent, he can make all the throws that you need him to make. Some of those that one throw to Skinner in the back of the end zone is something you see on Sundays. It was just, I mean, on a rope. It was crazy.
This wide receiver group, like we've said before, has been quite impressive this year. They've been incredibly consistent. You haven't seen much for penalties. You haven't seen much drops. You're seeing guys, and again, we'll get into this with Jason Bean under center now, but being able to read Daniels as he's moving throughout the pocket to still find ways to get open. Jared Casey's been excellent at that, where he runs his route. Jalon has to get out of the pocket, and then they both adjust and find themselves open, just kind of like we see with Mahomes and Kelsey. But yeah, Luke Grimm had that toe tipping touchdown in the back of the end zone from Bean. Skinner had the two bombs for touchdowns. Mason Fairchild had a big chunk play that he caught over the top of him, basically a no look catch. Sevion Morrison broke off a huge run, and I was hoping that would lead to some more opportunity for him, which we didn't see. But that had a big impact on the game at a critical moment. Devin Neal broke off a couple chunk plays here and there. But the offense, just like you said, struggled a little bit in that first half, had a few plays here and there, and it really didn't get going until the Daniels injury and Bean took over. So let's jump into that. So Jalon goes down, he's running to the outside. gets hit pretty hard when he lands on his collarbone, shoulder a little awkwardly, you know, not really sure what was going on. They took him, that was right before halftime. So they took him in at halftime, came back out. Next thing you know, we see him in street clothes. I didn't really have full details at the time other than we think it was, something with that shoulder collarbone. Find out a little bit later that it's an AC separation. So for those of you that don't understand, the AC joint connects up to the collarbone, and the way the impact of how he hit the ground separated that joint underneath the collarbone. Now, none of us are doctors. There's a lot of opinions on how recovery is from that. Early on, it was mentioned that he might be out the rest of the year. Turns out that was false. Then we get the tweet of Jalen's like, well, this is a surprise to me. And then next thing you know, you see him in Leipold's office flashing the guns, looking fine. Um, but he is listed as doubtful for this weekend. Probably is going to miss another week or two after that, in my opinion. Most people say that the AC joint, it's about pain management. Not really a whole lot you can do to really fix the issue. He's going to be dealing with it the rest of his career. But it's really how long can he go? How much pain can he handle? How much of that is going to impact his throwing arm? So we're not going to see him this week, which means Jason Bean is back under center. But Tyler, are you worried at all, before we get into Bean, are you worried at all with the loss of Jalon Daniels? And do you think by not having him under center and moving to Bean, does that change anything drastically that KU fans should be worried about?
I think it's kind of hard not to be a little worried just with how well he's played all season. That's going to be hard to replace all that production. And one thing I wanted to you kind of touched on earlier with his shoulder injury, it being his throwing shoulder kind of makes me a little nervous too. That if it was his left shoulder, that maybe he might be able to play through it. But since it's his throwing arm, he's really going to have to either deal with the pain or they're going to have to let it. He's going to have to sit out a while. But I'm a little worried. But I think it's not anything that Bean can't handle, and I think they'll kind of tailor the offense to him. And we saw some of that in the second half where he was able to get on the edge and outrun defenders, and that's one thing too is that I think he's actually faster than Jalon Daniels. So if they can design some plays to get him out in space, I think they can take advantage of his legs. And then if he is consistent, we've seen he can make all the throws. So I think it's a luxury to have the backup that we do because a lot of teams, their Heisman candidate goes down, and then it's kind of like, great, now what? Well, Bean played 6 games last year, so he has some experience, and I think he'll do well.
My level of concern is pretty similar to yours. It's medium to somewhat low. And I think there's three reasons why I'm not too worried, and KU fans shouldn't be worried either. Number one is Andy Kotelnicki. Like we've talked before, he is an offensive genius. I think this offense, take away Jalen's talent and ability, most quarterbacks, if they have decent talent, I think could succeed in this style of offense because of all the switching around and movement. It keeps the defense honest and keeps them on their toes. So I do think that is a big luxury for us, having an offensive coordinator that can design these unique schemes, get guys in motion, move them around, confuse the defense, spread the ball around to kind of keep you thinking about what's coming next. Secondly, even though Jalon has tremendous talent and ability and has some skill sets that I think are better than Bean, one of those being I think Jalon reads the field really well and has developed some high quality chemistry with his guys, kind of like I said with Patrick Mahomes and Kelsey. When he gets moving around, his receivers know where he's going. And I think we saw a little bit of that later in the game with Kai Thomas and Devin Neal and Jason Bean maybe not understanding some of the timing with pitches and some of the throws Jason Bean made, just the timing was off. So that does give me concern there. But again, the play calling has been fantastic, and I think that's not going to be an issue there. When you look at Jason Bean himself, little bit different skill set from Jalon. Like you said, they both can run. They both can make plays with their feet for sure. Both have big arms. Bean is wicked fast, and they're definitely going to tap into that ability there. Um, so I'm not too concerned from the production standpoint because Bean put up. Let me pull up his stats. I just had him up a second ago. I mean, he had a massive second half. Ended up throwing for 262 yards, went 16 of 24 for 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. That kind of awkward dump off pass to Neal that he just way overthrew. So his QBR rating was above a 90, which was fantastic. And even though Max Duggan had a huge game, his QBR was higher than that. And he also rushed for 34 yards on 7 carries. So Bean still looks solid in this offense. Um, Definitely looked better than he did last year, but like you said, there is some inconsistency with some of the throws. So we'll be kind of curious to see now that he has a full week of practice, can he develop that timing? That's my concern is now now that Daniels is gone, how quickly can Bean work on that timing with his other guys that are used to working with Jalon with the first team reps? So can he develop that throughout the week? Maybe it takes him a little bit longer this game to prove that, but I think at the end, the way Kotelnicki's going to run this offense, Bean's going to be out in the field moving around, and he made some pretty big throws, like we said. Those touchdowns to Skinner were massive, and he didn't seem afraid to throw the ball downfield. So I thought that was inspiring and gave me hope for what could be. Again, if he can be consistent, then I'm not too worried there. Um, but yeah, this is gonna be a little bit new look offense. What do you think will what should KU fans expect this first weekend? Assuming Jalon is out longer than a week or two, what do you think KU fans should expect from this offense moving forward with Jalon or with Jason Bean under center?
Well, like you said, Bean put up good numbers, and it's not like it was against a terrible defense. I mean, TCU's got a defense that pretty much shut us down in the first half, so he definitely has the skill to get it done. And then I think, like you mentioned with Koldenicki, good coaches, they have their system, but they kind of tweak their system to fit the players that they have. So I think a lot of that'll happen, and he'll find ways to best utilize Bean's skill set to move the ball and make plays. So I think a lot of there'll be quarterback runs. I don't know if they'll try to limit like his decision making on options to where you saw Daniels where he could either take off, pitch to the running back, or even throw it. I think that might be a little too much for Bean coming back having to make the reads. Like you said, Daniels is great at reading the field, so I think they might change it to where he has, quick reads, one or two options to where he can make a quick decision and kind of move the ball that way. Otherwise, I don't think the offense will change too much. They're pretty similar. I think we'll still try to establish the run, um, and take those shots down the field. And I think what we'll see is hopefully a powerful offense like we showed in the second half of that TCU game.
Just like you said, this offense still runs through the run game. And I think as long as they can get close to their season average around that 200 rushing yard mark, divide it up amongst the guys, that I think they'll be fine. So let's kind of move our eyes to this Oklahoma matchup. Coming into the weekend, Oklahoma has had a rough last couple weeks. 2 weeks ago, they got spanked by K-State 55 to 24, and it looked terrible. Their starting quarterback Dylan Gabriel went out, and they went to some of their backups. Offense looked very uninspiring. The defense looked terrible. Well, then that turned into this last weekend with the Red River rivalry. Wow, that's a mouthful. With Texas, and it was more of the same. Texas jumped out early and often, and Texas, who has also struggled this year, came out of nowhere and just spanked Oklahoma. I mean, they shut them down start to finish, kept them scoreless. Again, Dylan Gabriel missed all of that game, so they had their backup quarterbacks in. None of them looked good whatsoever. It was just all around a very, very non-Oklahoma-like performance. Did you catch any of that game at all?
I watched a few minutes of it. I couldn't believe how bad Oklahoma looked. You think being a rivalry game that even if they didn't play their best, that their effort would kind of cover up some of the mistakes that they would keep it close, but that just wasn't the case at all. So I'm kind of wondering what Oklahoma we see next week. Like, do they still like does Coach Venables have them, trying to play hard and finish out the season, or have they completely just moved on and since they've started so rough, have they given up? I'm not sure what Oklahoma will see, but it'll be interesting.
Yeah, they're sitting at 3-3, 0-3 in the conference, so they're more than likely out of the conference race as far as being Big 12 champs. Again, backup quarterbacks are out there. They look terrible offensively, look even worse defensively. As we'll get into some of this matchups here with KU, statistically, they're not that bad statistically. They're just not winning games. So I think like what you said, what type of OU do we see? Are they determined? Are they inspired this week? Do they feel the pressure of going 0-2 the last 2 weeks against teams that they probably are on paper better than? Maybe not K-State. K-State's been pretty impressive this year, but this just isn't the typical Oklahoma team we're used to seeing. And what are they going to look like? Are there other stars? If their other stars don't look motivated, I think that'll be a good indication of this team kind of throwing in the towel for the rest of the year. But let's look at this preview. So on paper, KU is better statistically in literally every category, yet somehow they open as a 9-point underdog with a only 30% chance of winning. Now, I think most of that, two reasons. One, it's at Oklahoma, so a very tough environment, regardless of how good they are. But two, I think this is a classic case of maybe the national perspective still holds on to the history of Oklahoma and thinking that that name still carries a lot of weight, even though the program this year is not that good. And even though Kansas is sitting at 5-1 in rank, that maybe this is the week that KU proves everybody wrong and actually falls back to what we're used to seeing. So on paper, like I said, KU dominates them in almost every statistical category. KU's averaging almost 40 points right now. Oklahoma's averaging 30. KU's only giving up 26 points, and Oklahoma's giving up 29. So right there, KU's already a winner. Total yards of offense, KU has a slight edge at 440 versus 433 to 434. Almost even in passing and rushing at 226 to 223, 213 to 210. Yards allowed, KU though is averaging 50 yards less allowed per game at 395 versus 450 to Oklahoma. And the big difference here is Oklahoma's given up over 200 rushing yards a game, whereas KU is limiting teams to 120. So I think that right there shows you the biggest opportunity in this game is if this is a game that KU can control the line of scrimmage like we've talked about before and dominate in the run game, they can control the tempo, they can control the play calling, they can put Oklahoma on their toes, pushing them back on their heels, and just really drive this game. I think the other statistic I was looking at is Oklahoma is only averaging 25 minutes of time of possession, about 25 minutes throughout the course of a game. So their defense is on the field more than their offense. So okay, to me, again, this is an indicator of if KU controls the run game, they're gonna control this game. And even though they're listed as the 9-point underdogs, I think from a betting standpoint, you gotta take them on the money line, take the spread. I don't see how KU comes out and is almost a double digit loser. There's just no way. The way they're playing, even coming off a loss, unless Oklahoma just has all the motivation in the world and they come out hot, I just don't see how this game goes any other way than a KU victory. What's your thoughts on this game?
No, no, I think you're right. One thing I would point out is I think our defensive line will have a big impact on the game, and they did against TCU. And you can see those guys play hard. They rotate constantly between the defensive line and the linebackers. And I think if we can, stop the run, like you said, whoever controls the clock, and if we can run the ball and stop Oklahoma running the ball, I think that'll go a long way to us being able to get the win. But I look for a big game from, man, watching Lonnie Phelps. That guy just does not stop. It looks like he gets held on almost every play, and he just keeps going and going and going. So I expect a
Yeah,
big
he's
game from
got
him.
quite the impressive motor. He seems to
Yeah.
always be, he kind of like we've talked about this before. Kenny Logan is one he that no matter where the ball is on the field, he seems to always be around where the play is being made. I think Phelps is also one of those guys where you see him on the quarterback or in the backfield so many times. Right now he's leading the team in sacks at 6. Um, he's also got 37 yards of sack loss there. So he's pushing even on these sacks. He's pushing them back too, and so he's been quite impressive. That defensive line as a whole, I think, has incredible depth. Even the way TCU was playing, they were giving KU time to substitute on the line to keep everyone fresh. So they've got like 6, 7 guys deep on that line, which definitely helps being able to get to the quarterback. And of course, you look at your linebackers are super athletic. Craig Young had another big game. Barry Hill's still been looking solid. So yeah, this defense has been quite impressive. Should be able to slow down Oklahoma, especially with backup quarterbacks in. But like you said, it's going to come down to that run game. Can the defensive line hold their own? Can Lonnie Phelps be the beast that he's been? and Rich Miller keeping things under control. How about offensively for KU? What do you think this game needs to look like pace wise for them um, to stay up and ahead? Do you think this is one where we continue to see Bean throwing the ball a lot, or is this a real run heavy approach? How would you game plan to take on Oklahoma offensively?
I think I'd make them prove that they could stop the run first. So I would try to go on, long 12, 13, 14 play sustained drives, taking 7, 8 minutes off the clock. And you do that a couple of times, it kind of breaks the will of the defense. And if we're able to run the ball consistently, I think, we'll be able to score, limit Oklahoma's possessions. Our defense will be, even though they rotate, they'll be fresh. So I think the way to a victory is running the ball. If we have to, drop back and pass 30, 40 times, I think we might be in trouble. But I think the game plan would be to prove that Oklahoma can stop the run and just keep doing it until they do.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. The pass game will come, but if you can control the trenches and get the run game going, that completely opens up everything else you need offensively to spread the ball around. Obviously, we're going to see Jason Bean on a lot of run plays, and he's going to get out in open space. You're going to see a very heavy dosage of Devin Neal. So when Highshaw was still here and active, they were splitting carries. So Neal was getting about 10 to 11 carries a game. This last weekend, we saw him get 15. Saw Kai Thomas get worked in a little bit more, and honestly, Morrison only had that, I think, that 1 or 2 carries. So I do think we'll see a heavy run dosage, hoping we see some more Sevion Morrison because it seems like when he touches, he's averaging about 11 yards a carry. So when he gets the ball, he's hitting that gap and he's trudging ahead real quick. And I think Kai Thomas, he just needs some more time to get in there and get comfortable. So what's your final score prediction for this weekend?
Oh, I hate doing these, but I've been thinking about it a couple days in anticipation of this. So I'm gonna go KU 31, Oklahoma 24.
Okay, so pretty close to what some other experts out there have been talking about. I think this is a game where KU may struggle a little bit offensively because I'm guessing I'd be shocked if Oklahoma just comes out and drops dead like they have in the last 2 weeks. So I think they're going to have some fight in them. So I think it'll be a little messy and slow early on, but I think KU still pulls off a pretty big win. I've got it right about the same as you. Since I can't have it the same, I'm going to go 33-24, give KU the extra 2 points there, and actually take the spread and flip it the other way. So I've got KU with another win, moving to 6-1, becoming bowl eligible for the first time in 12 years, 15, oh, yeah, 12 years, and sitting there close to the top of the conference, right below some of the other teams that they still have to face. Um, so yeah, I feel pretty good about this weekend. Obviously, it sucks not having Daniels. We'll kind of have to wait and see. They've been pretty quiet on that. They've literally said it's day to day. The only thing we've really heard is it's very unlikely he plays this weekend. Is he out 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? I guess let me pose you this question. Is there a scenario where you see Bean playing well enough that if Jalon is healthy, they keep Bean instead of going back?
I
Because
would
we did
say
see that last year where Bean
yeah, he
got
did
hurt,
play early in
Daniels
the.
started, and then they kept Daniels the rest of the
I
year.
would say if he's, close to 100% healthy, I think they go back to Daniels, just because, he's shown what he can do in the first half of the season. And I think that's kind of a tough thing that, he gets injured and then, I don't see Leipold and his crew, pulling him and giving Bean the job if they have the option of giving it to a healthy Daniels. But we don't know how healthy, like, I would assume they'd go with Bean if Daniels is only 60 or 70% healthy. So it all depends on how much, like you said before, how much pain he can tolerate, how fast it heals. But I wouldn't expect them to stick with Bean if Daniels is completely healthy.
I agree with you there. This is still Daniels' team, but if Bean's playing well, that might help them slow the return of Daniels. If they don't really feel like they have to press to get him back and going, and Bean's playing well enough, then I don't think there's any reason to rush him back. Um, so that's that. Let's now jump into a little bit of KU basketball talk. Late night is just a couple nights away this upcoming Friday, and if you haven't been paying attention, the headliner this year is DJ Shaq Diesel in the house. I think that's going to be awesome seeing Shaquille O'Neal up close in person. Um, Not sure how talented he is as a DJ, but that is going to be super fun to have him there. So, Tyler, late night means that basketball season is just around the corner. Even though KU's having an impressive football year, the undisputed returning defending NCAA champions, the Kansas Jayhawks, are coming back to their basketball season. We will see the banner unveiling Friday night and get a good look at a lot of the new guys on this team. How excited are you that KU basketball is coming back?
I'm pumped, man. It's kind of weird because we're usually used to sitting at this time and being like, oh, it's a 2 weeks from late night. We're about there, but now with the football team doing so well, it seems like time's flying by. And like you said, late night's Friday, and Shaq's gonna be the MC. I think that'll be interesting. Late night always is. It's a great recruiting tool, and it's kind of a great way to kick off the start of the basketball season. And you can't ask for anything better than unveiling the national championship banner in Allen Fieldhouse in front of a packed crowd. That's
Yeah.
it. Just doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, it is crazy to think that this is a year where we're not like, oh my gosh, late night needs to get here because KU football is miserable. We need something to look forward to. Now we get to have the luxury of enjoying both. So late night as a whole is not quite what it used to be. It's supposed to be entertaining. You don't really see a lot of the talent and all that, but you've got a lot of new faces on this team. And, next week we're going to start picking up some KU basketball talk. But what are you looking forward to as far as some of the new players on the team, some of the new faces? Not that we're going to see much at late night in general, but what are some things you look forward to about this new team this year and how they can start back up and defend that crown and get back to the championship stage again?
It's going to be interesting because I think it has to be a pretty different team than last year. Losing Braun and then Ochai, those two big losses there. But I think it'll be Jalen Wilson's going to have to step up, and I think he'll be, this is his team or what everybody thinks is going to be his team. And then I'm interested to see how Zach Clemens does that in the post because I think he's eventually going to start at the five. So it'll be interesting to see if he had been able to put on some muscle and strength over the summer, and then of course the freshman. I don't know if you've seen MJ Rice, but he looks like a grown man. He's 18,
No
19 years
kidding.
old, but he is
He's big.
jacked. And I think if he can see playing time, I think there's nobody that can stop him from getting to the rim.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what he looks like. I'm really excited to see what Grady Dick looks like. Bill Self's already mentioned that he has potential to be one of the best shooters KU's had in a long time, even as a freshman. So all eyes are turning towards that. And if Grady Dick does what everyone's projecting, he may be a one and done guy. But yeah, I'm pumped for it. So late night is coming up 2 nights from now. Festivities start a little after 6 p.m. Like I said, DJ Shaq Diesel will be in the house, and then the regular season is coming up pretty soon. Um, that's really all I wanted to touch on tonight. Like I said, I'm pumped that we get to be talking KU football and also getting prepped for KU basketball in the meantime. So next week we're going to start ramping up some of that.
I've
So if
got a
you have
question
it,
for
yes,
you,
sir.
if we have time. Do we have
Absolutely. We got a
time?
few minutes. We got a few
All right.
minutes.
If I were to tell you before this football season started that KU is going to be 5-1 going into Norman, who is 3-3, and KU is going to be the ranked team, would you have believed me? I mean, there's no way.
I don't think there is anybody on planet Earth that would believe that saying.
Especially Oklahoma starting at six, number six in the first poll. It's just unbelievable. You're talking about trying to get to 6 wins to make a bowl game, and there's a chance we could do it in Norman against Oklahoma, and that just blows my mind. And it's just exciting every weekend. So
It would be
I'm
a
pumped for
massive
it.
victory. Even though Oklahoma does not look as good, winning at Norman is always a
Yeah,
big, big win. That's a hard place to go in and win. And if KU does, I mean, they're still looking like they're at the top, one of the top teams in the Big 12. And, that's a huge program booster. You said how it could impact recruiting now that KU could have a team that's potentially better than two of the teams that have been the best Big 12 teams over the last 10, 15 years. So a lot of excitement on the football side. A lot of excitement coming on the basketball side. So to you guys, the listeners, if you haven't done so, you do want to follow us everywhere because our content is going to start picking up. not only will we be doing KU football, we'll be jumping into KU basketball here pretty soon, and of course some more Chiefs stuff. So you can find us on Twitter right now at the Sports A Gurus. Give us a follow, and we will follow back as well. Find us on Facebook at the Sports Authority Gurus. Like our page. We have all of our information about upcoming episodes there. We're getting into a couple other things here coming up, so stay tuned for some big announcements. But as far as next week, we'll have hopefully 2 episodes next week. One recapping the big game this weekend in Oklahoma and seeing where that leaves the Hawks moving forward now that they're entering the second half of the season, as well as we will jump on, have a couple other voices on next week for a second episode to discuss KU basketball now that late night will be behind us and the season is just a couple weeks away. So we'll kind of do a little bit of KU basketball talk as well. So bonus episodes next week, and then guys, after that, the ball is just going to be rolling into lots more content. We'll do tons of KU football, tons of KU basketball, still plenty of Chiefs talk. Spencer, my other co-host, him and I will start sprinkling in some NBA talk here as well. So guys, please give us a like and a follow on all of our platforms. As far as the podcast is concerned, you can find us on Spotify, YouTube, and iHeartRadio. Give us a like, give us a follow, rate the podcast, give us a comment when you can, share with your friends, and until next time, guys, rock chalk.